Gore, aspetta, lo aspetti qua, non davanti, lo aspetti qua.
Ma non davanti, cazzo!
Non davanti, via davanti, scusa! Scusi, non davanti, per favore. Non davanti, ragazzi, ci stiamo. Scusi. Ragazzi, per cortesia. Non siamo al mercato, no, per favore, questione qua. Scusi, perché sta... No, non davanti, scusa! No, da questa parte! Dottor Luciano! Scusa, no, non davanti! Scusa! Mr. Gore, please! Mr. Gore, one moment, please.
Hi, how are you? Thank you.
E a proposito di Siena, io invito sul palco il professor Enzo Tiessi, che è coordinatore del Dipartimento di Scienza e Tecnologia dei Biosistemi dell'Università di Siena.
Gli americani mondiali. È stato molto facile incontrarsi, abbiamo trovato un colloquio comune. Certo, noi parlavamo di scienza, io sono professore di chimica fisica, loro sono dei creativi, dei meravigliosi creativi, però io credo che questo matrimonio sia stato un matrimonio felice.
Bravissimo, perché è stato nei tempi abbondantemente.
Parlo di museo, quindi veramente siamo come triennale felici di avere questa iniziativa, proprio perché nel museo c'è uno spazio dedicato alle aziende e quindi le iniziative del gruppo Benetton di fabbrica, che vanno dalla comunicazione al design di prodotto, attenzione allo spazio retail, sono proprio nella filosofia di quello che noi andremo a rappresentare nel museo. Però ci sono poi altri due motivi: il fatto che con questa iniziativa che ora abbiamo in mostra si dà spazio ai giovani. Triennale ha appena fatto una mostra sul design giovane italiano, criticata, discussa, però è nel nostro DNA. E poi altro elemento, abbiamo visto i creativi di prima, l'apertura di un gruppo che per i propri spazi retail ha dato da gestire al Politecnico, che tra l'altro rappresento, e a tutte le altre università europee e mondiali un concorso, e quindi non se lo sono tenuto in casa. Quindi estrema apertura di un gruppo che mi sembra giustamente vediamo oggi con piacere in triennale.
Grazie Presidente. Allora, grazie a Benetton Group per il privilegio e l'opportunità di essere qui con voi, tutti insieme, voi, me, con l'ospite che sto per presentarvi. Quando si tratta di presentare un ospite, per chi fa il mio lavoro, si cerca di indovinare qual è l'espressione giusta da usare per chiamarlo sul palco. Potrei ricorrere alla stessa battuta che lui fa nel suo film, premio Oscar, Una scomoda verità, quando dice ex futuro presidente degli Stati Uniti d'America.
Thank you very much. As many of you know, the word crisis in Italian and in English is expressed with a single word that conveys a sense of alarm. But in Chinese and in Japanese, they use two symbols together to say crisis, and the first of them by itself means danger. The second one by itself means opportunity. And I've long believed that that is a more sophisticated and better way of conveying the concept of a crisis, because in every crisis there is not only danger but also opportunity, and this one is the most dangerous we have ever faced, but also presents us with the greatest opportunities we have ever confronted. We were talking earlier about the challenge that lies before us. First of all, it is a challenge to our moral imagination, because there is nothing in the prior history of the human race that gives us a basis for understanding the nature and the reality of this crisis, because the roots of this crisis are in the relationship between humankind and the planet itself. And that relationship has been radically transformed in a very short period of time. And there are three factors that have combined to transform the relationship between humankind and the ecological system of the Earth. The first, of course, is the population explosion. And while we are all familiar with it, it is startling to look at what has happened in the last 100 years in the context of the last 100,000 years. Our species emerged, according to the scientists, between 160 and 190,000 years ago, and if they are correct, it took 10,000 generations before we reached a population of almost 2 billion people at the middle of the century. At the beginning of the century, it was only the 20th century, 1.7 billion. But now we have reached, as of this year, 6.7 billion people. So we have quadrupled the population of human beings in less than 100 years. And we will add almost another 3 billion before this century has been completed. Now, that is not the principal place to look for a solution to the climate crisis, because population is already stabilizing. And there are four factors that combine to bring about a transformation in the dynamics of population, and in every country this change is now underway. It is perhaps most advanced in Italy, as you know, but in many Western European countries and in Japan, population dynamics have completely stabilized. But even in the high-growth countries, family sizes are coming down fairly significantly and more quickly than anyone predicted. And we know much more now than we did 20 years ago about what causes this change from one equilibrium to another, from high birth rates and high death rates to low birth rates and low death rates. What causes that change is the education of girls and the empowerment of women and the availability of family planning that is culturally acceptable, and higher survival rates for children, so that parents develop a confidence that if they have small families, their children will survive into adulthood. When all four of those conditions are present, particularly the education of girls, then family sizes come down. And so this is already well underway, and it is happening. But it is still important to focus on this factor, because it is an important part of the explanation for why our relationship as human beings to the planet is so completely different than it has ever been in all of prior history. Our footprint on the Earth, our impact on the planet, is much greater now than anything in the history or experience of our species. So we have to take responsibility for this new relationship and understand that we have become like the proverbial bull in a china shop, casually doing damage without really even being aware that even innocent intentions can cause quite a catastrophe. The second factor that's transformed our relationship to the planet, of course, is even more powerful, and that is the technological and scientific power that we have to magnify the impact of our intentions. And so even age-old habits have much greater impacts now because they're magnified by the new tools we have at our disposal, thousands of times more powerful than anything that our grandparents were able to use. Fishing with traditional nets, for example, fed villages for thousands of years, but nets that are now 70 kilometers long and guided by highly sophisticated sonar devices, scraping the ocean bottom and vacuuming every living thing through large swaths of the ocean. That practice, even though the intention is the same, the impact is much greater now And so we have to take that into account and modify our behavior and understand that even age-old habits can have vastly different consequences now. And that brings up the third reason for our new relationship to the planet, and that is our way of thinking. If we only focus on the short-term consequences of what we're doing, then we will not be able to fully see the consequences that will be felt by our children and our grandchildren. And this short-term mentality has caused so many problems in the business world, in the political world, in the media world, everywhere. As I mentioned before, I used to be in politics. 30 years ago, when I first made a campaign, I never took a public opinion poll. But by the time I left politics, it was common to take a poll every single day and look at the results first thing in the morning. And now they wire these groups that are called focus groups, and they monitor their reactions almost continuously as a kind of an ongoing 24-hour-a-day poll. And the results have not been that good, by the way. And in the media, the sweeps weeks, the short-term measurement of audience ratings, drives the content of programming. So that in my country, for example, there was much less coverage of the failures at the G8 meeting last week than there was about Paris Hilton going to jail. And the month before, less coverage about a melting of ice and snow in the Antarctic the size of California than there was about Anna Nicole Smith's funeral arrangements. And the conversation of democracy that is so important to empower free citizens to govern themselves and to face these challenges, particularly the ones that have a longer-term dimension, really is part of the challenge that we have to address. When we reach a critical mass of public opinion, with enough people feeling, not only understanding, but feeling the incredible and unprecedented magnitude of this challenge, then we have work to do that will be worthy of our best efforts and will represent the opportunities that I spoke of. Getting the attention of the world is one of the objectives of these Live Earth concerts on July 7th, 7707. And 2 days ago, I announced that the 9th concert that day will be organized and held in Istanbul. Others will be in London and in New York and in Sydney and in Johannesburg and in Rio de Janeiro and in Shanghai and in Hamburg. And other smaller concerts will be held elsewhere. And it is an opportunity to capture the attention of the world to deliver an SOS for the climate in crisis, and then ask people to answer the call and provide the solutions that are available. Our planet now has a fever. Literally, the amount of global warming pollution is increasing by 70 million tons every 24 hours. And it has now accumulated to the point that much more of the sun's heat is trapped in the atmosphere, as you know. If your child has a fever, you go to the doctor. And if the doctor says it's a sign of deeper problems, you generally take the doctor's recommendation. The world scientific community has told us this is very serious. We have a short amount of time, and we have to act. So as we act, what are these opportunities that I've mentioned twice now? First of all, in the built environment, buildings are responsible for more global warming pollution than all of the cars and trucks in the world combined, and more besides. And yet, because of this continued population growth that is beginning to level off but is continuing, and because of the simultaneous trend toward urbanization, which is causing the largest migrations in history right now. In China, under Mao Zedong, 10% of their population lived in cities, now more than 50%, and their goal is 70%. And when I was in Istanbul 2 days ago, it was apparent, as the studies show, the stream of people from the rural areas to the east into the city is the same that is happening in Mexico City and Lagos, Nigeria, in the many new cities in China, more than 10 million each.